Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of 401 Pop Culture, where real people talk about really everything. I'm Justin, this is Danielle, and tonight we're doing another VC Andrews theory video. We actually filmed two, the last episode and this one, so that's why we're wearing the same shirts and all that. But this one I'm also really excited to talk about. It's been sort of requested in various formats throughout the years that we've been doing this, and I think it's a really important topic, but it's a really big topic. We're going to focus on a very small, specific part of it to hopefully make it not too complex and to get to what the point of it is. But please note, we might revisit this topic again. We might come back to the specific points of this topic depending on what you all think, what we think about it when it comes out, because it is hard for us, this episode, for us to really put into words, because one, we're not VC Andrews. We're not, you know, I write, but I'm not necessarily a storyteller. Nobody is Virginia Andrews, not the ghostwriter, who, again, I always like to say, we obviously are bigger fans of Virginia Cleo Andrews, but I love Andrew Niederman's work too. His individual work. Pin is one of my favorite books. The Need, I think, was a great novel he wrote
Yeah.
that I really think should have been made into a movie. I think it would have been a really cool movie. So I really like Andrew Niederman. But obviously, when we talk about Virginia Cleo Andrews, it's a very specific part. This episode, though, now, this is something that, yes, I had kind of thought about throughout the years, but I believe, and I searched through the comments, and there's so many, so I'm hoping I found the earliest time that somebody ever brought this up, and I believe it was Thomas Franch, who I should be doing a picture of right now of his comment that first kind of re-energized my thought, something I had kind of forgotten about, and he really did make me think about it, like, oh, yeah, this is an interesting topic. Now, again, I think all of us VC Andrews fans have thought about what if Virginia Cleo Andrews had finished the Casteel series, had written the Cutler series, had written Ruby, all of those. But he did bring up a very specific point that has always really stuck in my mind, which is about the character of Sarah, which we will get into. But I do want to say that I think it's become clear after especially reading The Woman Beyond the Attic that Andrew Niederman pretty much wrote Garden of Shadows and Fallen Hearts and pretty much everything after that. And I think that, like, they always kind of put at the beginning back in the day, like, this is a work of fiction since the passing of the actual Virginia Andrews. A ghostwriter was selected to finish her work, which really gave the impression that these were stories of hers that just needed to be finished. But I mean, after reading like the ghostwriting stuff and some articles, I think too, I've seen, I think it's been made pretty clear that she did not do really any of Guardian of Shadows. She definitely did not do Fallen Hearts or any of the Cutler series. And I think that's one of the main factors of that is The Obsessed, the book, the
Yeah.
story, The Obsessed. Why was it, if that was an actual one we know was started by her, why wasn't that one finished? If the ghostwriter was coming in to do all this, which is fine. I love the Cutler series. I love the Landry series. I mean, that's one of my favorite series too, even though it's not written by her at all, and I think we all kind of always knew that. But Fallen Hearts and Dawn and all those, I've always thought, what if, Virginia Cleo Andrews had finished that? Have you always thought about that?
So I didn't really know that when I first started reading the books. So to me, I read Heaven, and then when I read Dawn, I was like, this is so similar.
Hmm.
Like it was because Heaven and the Dollenganger series, I'm sorry, Casteel and Dollenganger, they're different but similar in the
Hmm.
pattern of like, okay, here's book one, here's this, that, that. But when I read Dawn, I'm like, gosh, this is almost like identical to Heaven, and
Which is
I'm
the flip for me. I read Dawn before the Castile.
right.
So when I was reading the Castile series, I was like, oh, this is kind of like Dawn.
Yeah.
Go on, I'm sorry.
So at that point, I was like, something's going on here. And then we became friends, and some of that came out. So originally, when I read them, I always thought they were written by V.C. Andrews. So I
Yeah.
will be honest about that. So when he brought this topic up to me, I thought, oh, my mind hasn't even begun to explore this
Mm,
wonderful idea and topic. So we've been really excited to do it.
yeah.
But yeah, so I will let you start with, kind of where we're gonna land as far as in because again, because I could do a whole episode just on Garden of Shadows alone.
Right.
Okay. So we'll start with just this simple part of the Castile series, couple topics, and then I'll piggyback off and
Well,
go from
thank
there.
you. Yeah, I think that then, I mean, really what we want to talk about here is, the last of the books that she wrote of this era was Dark Angel. And so therefore, Fallen Hearts was pretty much written by the ghostwriter. And I think some of the main topics that come up from that are, would she have brought Troy back?
Right.
Would the whole Logan and Fanny thing have happened? Would in the character, and again I want to thank Thomas, who really kind of made me want to shape this theory, which is about Sarah. And one of the most interesting things is the character of Sarah,
Yeah.
who is a prominent part of the first Heaven novel. And when
Hmm.
I remember when I picked up that book, I remember it thinking, now again, we can all debate who we think. I know too, there's always debates about who's on the step back covers. I feel like that on that step back cover of Heaven, that's clearly Sarah
I
at the
thought so too.
top.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that Luke is standing right next to her. I'm sure there's a certain sect of people out there, though, that probably think it's Kitty or something to that effect. I think it's supposed to
I
be
was thinking
Sarah.
Sarah.
Well, me too.
Yeah.
But people always, I mean, I've been reading BC Andrews stuff on the internet since the 90s, and there's always debates about who's on what step back cover. But anyway, I felt like when I saw that and knew the character of Sarah, I kept expecting something like terrible from her. And yeah, she does abandon the kids, and that's terrible. But it's not like grandmother Olivia terrible. It's
Yeah.
not like, Vera from My Sweet Audrina terrible. Maybe closest to Aunt Elspeth, in terms of like somebody who's not the nicest, but does have love for Heather or our main character, even though it's not their child.
Well, Luke treated her like crap, and she left. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, that's what I'm
yeah.
essentially saying is that she ended up leaving. But in the book Dark Angel, there is, when Heaven first gets there, she finds out that it's a temporary visit. She thinks she's staying with Jillian, staying with Tony. And when she finally works up the nerve to tell Tony, I want to stay, he basically says, well, I have some conditions. And one of the things is cutting out your family. And one of the things he says is about Sarah. This woman, Sarah, that you mentioned, the girl your father married shortly after Lee died, what was she like? And Heaven debates, well, what did he want to know that? She was from the hills. She was tall and raw boned, which who says that? And her hair was bright auburn, like the girl on the cover, the step back cover. I don't care what she looked like. What was she like? So she goes on that Heaven loved her until basically she left. She kind of stops, and he's like, "You must strike the name of Sarah from your lips and your memory, and hope never to see her again." And Heaven's like, "I don't know where she is." And Tony says, "Heaven, if there's one thing I've learned in 40 years, it's the fact that bad seeds have a way of turning up." So interestingly enough, I feel like that's set up for that VC Andrews, Virginia Cleo Andrews set that up that Sarah was going to come back at some point. That's quite a thing to say that like, oh, if I've learned anything, and Tony was that sort of character created to be like mean and ambitious and powerful, but often right about people. That's
Yeah.
how he made his millions.
Hmm.
And I think that it was set up that Sarah was supposed to come back. And I think if Virginia, I don't know that she necessarily even probably wanted to continue the Heaven series.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
Like, with the Ghostwriter, we keep having these sets of five, sets of five, sets of five. But like, My Sweet Audrina was a random book. The
hmm
Obsessed was random. At
Gods of
least,
Green Mountain was a fantasy series, but it was
yeah.
only one book. And who knows if she wanted to make that into a
Right. I
series.
mean, this could have been two books, and that was like
hmm
it. I mean, she might not have ever wanted to continue it, in my opinion.
And
But
I have a feeling that, yeah, it was always the publishers that kind of pushed her for the Dollinger
yeah,
sequels and stuff. I don't know that necessarily she wanted to them. Even how she wrote the original Petals on the Wind wasn't how she, or the release Petals on the Wind, how it wasn't how she wrote it. She wrote it as a very complete, the Where the Greener Grass Grows manuscript is a very complete, here's the end.
yeah, yeah. I don't think there was an intention there, but I will
But if
say,
there was, I think she would have brought Sarah back.
right. I do love when Justin reads to me. But
Oh, yeah, thanks. But yeah, I do think that if like she even VC Andrews though probably I mean she obviously did well at writing sequels and continue on the stories, and she knew at this point because all through I think Seeds of Yesterday had definitely been written. She could continue on the stories, and this was just as popular, the Casteel series. In fact, interacting with a lot of the fans out there through our comments and stuff, I know that most of you are more fans of Casteels like this one, and I'm more of a Dollenganger person. And I know that you're out there too, my Dollenganger people. But like Casteels was very, very popular.
mhm.
And I could see that she would even plant that in the mind of like, okay, Sarah's not going to come back in Dark Angel. But if you look at how Dark Angel ends, Heaven is getting ready to marry Logan and move back to Winter Row. Well, where would Sarah show up? Sarah had family there. Sarah was going to show up. And I really think that that would have been a plot point. Now, I don't know in what way,
She
what
would have been the
capacity.
villain. I mean, wasn't Fanny the villain?
Well, Fanny ended up becoming the villain. Yeah.
Right, but I think Sarah would have been the villain. So,
Probably, like even how Kitty sort of turned towards the end, like
yeah,
she was messed up and horrifying, but she also was like vulnerable at times. And I feel like Sarah would have been somewhere in there. But
yeah,
yeah,
no, I agree.
I do think she would have been an antagonist of some sort. Maybe not the villain, but definitely like I need some money, or maybe like offering love to Heaven, who clearly still is seeking a mother figure.
Yeah.
I mean, she was seeking that in Kitty,
And
Jillian,
then maybe Fanny would have got
Sarah.
jealous, and maybe that's
Oh, now see, that's interesting. And yes, I think that possibly Fanny would have gotten jealous. Now, other topics too we want to talk about though are would she have brought Troy back? Now, I will say, she did leave it open that Troy's body was not found at the end of Dark Angel. And but and usually VC Andrews was pretty good about saying like he was dead on his back, and he's dead. This person's dead. But you have somebody like Corey that we've theorized about who his death happened off stage.
the beauty of these Sanders, though, regardless. If I think about J.K. Rowling's
Hmm.
and how she had kind of written out like how she wanted the kind of end of the books to go and stuff like that, I don't think V. Sanders did that.
I don't think so
I
either.
think that was the beauty of her. She wrote her story so that her imagination did
Oh,
or her
100%.
book did not limit her to where she wanted to go with the story as because she's inspired as she writes, right?
Yeah.
And so like after again, you've got to read the autobiography or the
The
biography.
autobiography, but she
Yeah.
also and there's like a Faces of Fear interview she did. She
Hmm.
talks about that. What she does is she takes events from her life and she
Yes.
sort of references like My Sweet Audrina, how there was one time when she was a girl. I'm guessing something kind of happened, but she did outrun the boys. But the story of My Sweet Audrina is what if
Mhm.
she hadn't. In the Faces of Fear, she talks about I don't know if it's Faces of Fear, one of those articles back in the day she did,
Yeah.
where she talks about you're right, she
A
doesn't plan
news
it out.
article.
She wrote as to make sure she wanted to always keep turning the page. She said
Yes.
nothing frustrated her more than, picking up a book and like having to get through these details and details before you got to the story.
Yeah.
So you're right. She was not like J.K. Rowling in terms of planned out. It was
So
more on the spot.
right. So at that point, like if she left Troy's, the body wasn't found, if she started writing that next book and she decided, it's going to turn this way, I want to bring him back, she could have.
Yeah.
But I will say, I don't think she would have brought him back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in debate about it. I don't know. And that's why we said this is kind of a harder episode for us to theorize on. But I think that but again, the character of Logan, I think, would have been a bit different in Virginia's hands.
100%.
In Heaven, you want her with Logan,
Yeah.
but by the time you get to Dark Angel, you really want her with Troy. So
Yes.
I get that sort of that angst and feelings. That being said, I do remember when I read Dark Angel for the first time and Heaven gets sick and she's like being taken care of by Logan. I remember always thinking like, oh, maybe they're gonna get back together, like excited. Now I was never as big a Casteel fan as you were, but I mean I did love it. But again, it was the third series that I read at that time. And I think that I do think that there's a chance she would have not brought Troy back, and that probably would have shaped why Heaven may have done whatever Virginia Cleo Andrews wanted to happen, versus Troy becoming back. Because I do think that changed a little bit of the character of Heaven, where she was so. In the movie, I will say, even though the movies had their problems, one thing that I thought it kind of emphasized well was how she was so almost disconnected from Logan or not fully invested in their marriage because she was still pining for Troy. Whereas at the end of Dark Angel, the novel, she was really happy to
Yeah.
be Mrs. Logan Stonewall and going back to Winter Row.
Yes.
And I really think that Virginia, if she had written it, that would have been more of the focus
Yeah.
and less maybe bringing Troy back. She may still have, and I think you make a good point. She may have left it open if she wanted to for whatever reason. But I really think the central conflict may have been more about Sarah,
And Fanny and kind of all that.
which you were saying before we started filming that one of the things you're not a big fan of from Fallen Hearts is the Fanny Logan
Yeah,
scenario.
so, obviously, like Justin said, when we read Heaven, we love Logan.
Mhm.
Like, we want them together. And, like, even though we're, me, devastated about Troy, we're happy that Heaven's still able to find happiness with Logan.
Mhm.
And so you're like, they get this true love ending, they're moving back to winter, they're winter, you're all excited. And then he cheats on her. It just doesn't fit. I hate it. It really, that part just, even with Fanny being so terrible to Heaven and sleeping with him too, it's just the whole thing I just think is ick.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't match the character that we saw in book one. And I think that's also pretty obvious that the writing changed.
Well, I think too that like in Dark Angel, one of the yeah, exactly. By the end of book one, I mean, for better or for worse, Logan was a big conservative and it did
Yes.
change how he thought about heaven. And he
Hmm.
was kind of the same way in Dark Angel. Like he wanted her to be the best version of herself that that she could be, not all covered in makeup, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
Which whatever she wanted, she should have been able to do.
Right.
But from Logan's perspective. So considering who he was, I don't know if the character that he became in Fallen Hearts, where he's cheating on Heaven, would have necessarily been the way that Virginia would have taken him. And so I think you make a valid point about that. Kind of changes that whole dynamic, and especially because I think it would have become more about how Sarah was interfering with their lives. And I think that the Fanny stuff, I think you started to say this earlier, the Fanny stuff would have come from her jealousy that maybe Sarah was coming
Yeah.
back, because Sarah is Fanny's mother.
Yeah.
The fact that if Sarah, whether it was to try and get some money from Heaven, tries to be more of a mother to her, Fanny's going to flip out
Yeah.
about that.
Oh, yeah.
Fanny always got jealous over, well, Fanny always got lavished with the attention from her father that Heaven craved, but like the moment she didn't have it, she'd freak out.
Yeah.
And that did, she, to be fair to Fanny, she did get abandoned by her mother. She did get
Hmm.
abandoned by her father. So she has a right to be upset. But I think it would have set her over the edge seeing Sarah maybe trying to be Heaven's mother again, whether it was for pure reasons or to get money, which is what Tony predicted.
Or Fanny convinces Sarah to plot to get Heaven's
That's a point.
money,
Now that could have,
but
yeah,
Sarah's intentions were pure, but were kind of like maybe it would have been a Fanny Sarah thing,
yeah.
less
Less
Logan.
a Logan involved. Now that
Correct.
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's
I will
possible.
also say though, real quick to the point about Troy, we still have to have the reveal about Annie. So where do we fit that in? That would have had to been fit in if she
Well,
didn't bring him back to life, because he wouldn't
possibly,
know.
possibly, because well, it ends up in Fallen Heart. She gets pregnant, but if the stories they still want to do formulaic in some way, she could have had a daughter with Logan, and that would have been who the fourth novel Annie was, and maybe didn't have this sort of half brother, half cousin that ended up being neither.
Because we don't always
That
have to
she
have this
right, it just
incest.
could have been this was the story.
Yeah.
But because also I think like you know I think the way the movie kind of did this fix this problem a little bit, but when you reread the end of Dark Angel, I'm pretty sure quite a bit of time goes by. So the fact that like Troy was just like hiding for years and years because doesn't Heaven like go to college and
Yeah.
graduate, like that's at least 4 or 5 years later.
Hmm.
I mean, what was he doing just hiding and she never saw him on the grounds? Now, again, I want to be clear. I do like a lot, Fallen Hearts, I do like a lot about it. And I love Gates of Paradise. I remember the first time I read that. I really enjoyed that adaptation and I really enjoyed that novel. And I
Yeah, you
think
did.
Web of Dreams is one of the best of all the prequels. So I liked what the ghostwriter did with a lot of it, but I personally think there would have been some big differences
Yeah.
if our actual Virginia Cleo Andrews, who I'm pretty sure I feel like it's been all but verbally stated. It's been stated in every other way. She did not write any of Fallen Hearts, let alone was it a story that was continued by the ghostwriter. I'm pretty sure he took what he thought from the first book, and that had to be a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah.
Andrew Niederman was still writing his own novels at the time, let alone trying to write these novels that have such a specific fan base. But I really think like the whole part about Tony talking about Sarah, that's such a
No,
and
you're
I didn't
right.
think about it
Yeah.
for years and years, and it wasn't until Thomas brought it up that I was like, that's a real thought there. Like, it's really set up that Sarah's meant to come back into this story, and
Yeah. Yeah. Ever
it's left
since
on
that
it's left
comment
open.
has left him
Yeah,
like constantly wanting to do this episode
yeah.
and
It's
like
been a
talk
long time
about
I
it.
wanted to film it, yeah.
And I'm like, I never thought about it either. And so when he brought up the comment to me, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right.
Yeah,
Like, they never killed her. VC Andrews never killed her off or anything. She
right.
just left.
Yeah,
And you're right. People come out of the woodwork when you have money. And he set it up. I mean, it's all there.
yeah.
I really think she would have come back.
I think so too.
And
And
I think VC Andrews would have continued this series, by the way, even though we just
I
said
think so too, though. I think so too.
yes.
people really responded to it. And if she was willing to do it for the Dollenganger series, I think she would have as well for the Casteel series. And we may have still gotten an Annie, just different Annie. We may
Yeah.
have still gotten Logan and Heaven together, but it may not have been the same ending that they had.
Yeah. Ugh.
In the prequel, I would have loved to have seen what she would have done with the prequel of Web of Dreams because it was so good, but it would have been even tighter and made more, like, I don't know, been really great.
I just wanted to say, I know we were only going to talk about specific topics, but you just triggered me with the Logan and Heaven dying.
Mm,
And I remember because we got Kathy and Chris like to the end,
yeah,
right? They were grandparents. So when I'm going into heaven the first time, so when we get to book 4, and she kills them, I'm like, or he kills them, I'm like, did this like
it's pretty shocking, I remember,
I
yeah.
just don't think VC Anders would have done that. But that is for another episode.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing is because if she had been, I mean, the whole trajectory would have changed.
Yes.
So again, it's a harder topic to kind of speculate on because it could get so big
Yes.
real fast. So we wanted to kind of start this one very small, and the main things are, I think that Sarah would have definitely been brought back.
100%.
I think that you brought up this to me before we started filming. I agree that the Logan Fanny thing might not have happened, and I think it may have been more of a Fanny Sarah thing, whether that be they teamed up or somehow that's what made Fanny so jealous,
Mhm.
and maybe wanted Drake and all that. Instead of it being more about getting at Logan, it would have been more about Sarah.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been really interesting. And I'm still 50-50 on whether or not she would have brought Troy back. I think it's interesting that she left him, his body had not been found at the end of Dark Angel,
Yeah.
but I also could have seen it that she meant that to be maybe a backup if she needed, but maybe that was the final ending of Troy.
Yeah, I mean, honor his memory as like he could still be out there because Troy was that type of character in general,
Yeah,
like he
sort of
so
ethereal in his own way.
correct, right. So like, she met him like, unexpectedly and now he's gone. Like maybe he's still out there. It never
Yeah.
quite ends the Troy fantasy.
I agree completely. But what do you all think? What do you think would have happened if Virginia Cleo Andrews had continued at least Fallen Hearts, if not the entire Casteel series? Again, we might revisit this at a later date. It's such a big topic that it's hard to kind of say what we really think all the way through, but we wanted to make sure we covered those bits of it. But I did have fun discussing this one
Oh,
with
I
you.
love this topic.
Yeah, it's a good, interesting thought because it is one of those what could have been. Obviously, she only, considering how big B.C. Andrews is now, all the adaptations, all the novels, the actual Virginia Cleo really only wrote about 7 novels.
Yeah,
Let's see, the four from Dollenganger, My Sweet Audrina, yep, 7, and
yeah,
Dark Angel in Heaven. And I mean, obviously, The Obsession didn't finish, and Gods of Green Mountains wasn't published till way after her death. So 7 of the novels. Now, again, though, I think they're so important, and they're the ones that really stick throughout the
yes.
years. But the fact that like she only wrote these 7 novels, it leaves you with like, well, what if she had been able to continue for the next decade or two? Would VC Andrews have been the phenomenon she was? Because I do love the Cutler series. I love the Landry series. There's a lot about the Ghost Rider stuff I do enjoy. So
It's like a choose your own adventure right now with this
yeah,
topic. It is so much fun to talk about
yeah,
this with you. Um, Totally can't wait to see what you guys have to say.
yeah,
Bring up, I love the Sarah thing that was brought up, so please share anything. We'll
for
be
sure.
happy to talk about it because this one was really good. This was a fun one.
And I promise you, we still have a really long list of stuff that we've been planning for years now. It's just her finding the time, me finding the time, and us finding the time together. But let us know what you think. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy what you're seeing, please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.
John Amos